a third of the audience. So you're definitely, I assume the rest is here to learn more about APIs and what you can do with them and what they will bring to your company. So everybody, I think, knows this definition comes from Wikipedia. What an API is, an application programming interface is, basically enabling two softwares to talk to each other very easily. Kind of boring. I mean, it's reality, but it's kind of boring definition. If you go back in time and listen to some famous guys like Dion Hinchcliffe or Katarina Fake from Flickr, both of them, it was probably between 5 to 8 years ago, said dematerializing your distribution channels online are going to be critical for your internet business, or API are going to be BizDev 2.0 for your company. So you'd better have one. In other words, and a very good friend of mine, Adam Devender from Programmable Web, that Ken mentioned earlier, said APIs mean apps, partners, and incomes. So let's try to see why. You've got content, you've got data, you've got technology, whatever it is. You might have sold it in a box, old-fashioned software. You might sell it in a SaaS format and via your website mainly. The thing is, website is very limited. It's local, it's limited reach, it's expensive to bring people on board, you lose lots of opportunities, blah, blah, blah. You won't make a big business out of that only. If you want to go bigger and reach a bigger portion of the online population of the internet, you're going to need an API. There is no doubt about it. You will be able to expand and unlock new distribution channels with an API, okay? Because with that, you're going to leverage third parties, partners, developers, eventually your internal teams to create new applications, web or mobile, doesn't matter, internal or external, doesn't matter, and reach out to a whole new audience, much broader than the one you were reaching out with your website only. So in that sense, APIs are absolutely critical. Actually, there's been a survey done, I think it was a year ago, which tried to analyze what were the reasons why an API was used. In 53% of the cases, it was for a multi-channel strategy. And roughly less than a third was for mobile apps. It was a year ago. I think it might have some bias also from the audience that they've interviewed, because as of today, behind almost any mobile app, you've got an API or multiple APIs. There's no doubt about it. The thing is that many companies don't know that they have an API behind their mobile app. That's a problem. So, roughly, quickly, I'm not going to bother you with all those, the details in those boxes. This is just a short list of all the advantages an API can bring to your company. Partners, ecosystem, innovation, reducing cost. You don't sell boxes. You don't have to ship boxes anymore. Okay? You leverage third parties to resell your product, to resell your technology, to resell your data. So all of a sudden, you have to talk to a much smaller number of companies and individuals to make business with. Much easier than to talk to millions of people if you want to make a decent amount. And a few others. I think one is pretty interesting is Protect IPR also. It's not often mentioned, kind of related with security. People talk about security a lot with API. It is clearly an important topic, but I don't think it is less or more important than security of websites. It's the same. I mean, you've got a website, you've got to have security. You've got an API, you've got to have security. It's the same problematic, I would say. Maybe a little bit more complex, but not that much more complex. But one advantage of an API is that you keep in-house your technology. You keep in-house your servers, your logic, your algorithms. You don't ship any CD or servers or dump of your database to a partner that's going to reuse that into his own infrastructure. And that's very important. It's very useful to protect protect your content. And there's a few more in there. So basically, 3 key advantages for a company. A strategic advantage, you've got a first mover advantage versus your competitors. If you're the first one to release an API and you do it well, I mean, it's not just because you've got an API that you're going to be successful, obviously, but if you're the first one to release it and the first one to do a proper job with your API, you will have a strategic advantage. It will be a business advantage in terms, again, of cost reduction, in terms of agility, in terms of flexibility, innovation, etc. And finally, new revenue streams. We'll talk about that in a minute, the business models you can have with APIs, but you can definitely generate extra revenues, extra money with an API. You still don't believe me? I hope you do, but in case you don't, so APIs are more than a trend. They're a reality, they're a fact, they're everywhere, everybody uses them. You've heard probably of the Billionaires Club, those big companies that have around 1 billion calls or requests on their API per day or above, and there's going to be more and more. There are also a lot of those APIs that you never hear about, which do just a few thousands or hundreds of thousands of calls per day. You don't have to be big to be important, or your API doesn't have to do millions or billions of calls per day to be an important one. Okay, it depends at the end of the day in the business you're in. We have at 3scale customers that just do a few thousand calls per day on their API, but because they're in a pure B2B play and the value per call is extremely high, it's very important for their business, and they don't look at the value of their API in terms of number of calls. So be careful with that. It's a big bias, but still. And the other trend, or reality, is that hockey growth curve that Programmable Web has put out together. So we're at 9,000 APIs. It was in April this year. It's 100% growth year on year, and it looks like it's going to continue like that for a few more years. It's everywhere, every business. Kin mentioned it earlier. You can find APIs anywhere, personal APIs, so fitness, body APIs, you can find that. Building APIs, government APIs, anything. I mean, as of today, I don't think there is a single business that is not looking into an API, to be honest. Another thing is this 9,000 APIs is very interesting, is a hockey stick growth, and it's definitely going to continue, but that's 9,000 public APIs listed on Programmable Web. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. Below that, you have tons of APIs that are, you don't see well, sorry, private, meaning I have an API and I give it only to some selected partners. Private for now, in the sense that I'm working on it with a beta partner and I might open it up to a broader audience. And there's a truly private one, which, well, you have companies that have got an API or multiple APIs and they just use it internally. And they haven't released it yet to any third party, but they will come to that. And we've done some estimates based on current data, growth, etc. If we keep on with that trend, and assuming that there is 5 to 10 times more APIs than the 9,000 listed by Programmable Web, that means that we're going to have around 1 million API in 2017, which is still pretty non-significant versus the 650 million websites you have in the world today, but still. So what now? An API is great. You need to have one. It's undeniable. But remember, it's your organization core business that has value. The API is just a channel into that core business, into that core asset, into that value you bring to your customers. Okay? So don't get lured by this API halo too much. It is important, you need to have one because, again, much broader audience, much easier distribution channel than the traditional ones, but you need to have a valid core business to really think about opening up an API. And actually, the question is not really, so I've got an API and now what? What business model, what pricing strategy, what monetization, blah, blah, blah. Yes, you're going to have to ask some questions like that to yourself or to your company to push further your model, to push further, to set up your API strategy, your API program properly. But we believe that the right question is, what API do I need for my business model, for my company, for my core assets that I'm going to distribute to more people? And so that goes through different processes. The first one, I've called it API Business Strategy. Maybe the title is not the right one, but have you heard of the MVC framework? Who has heard of the MVC framework? Okay. MVC means basically that the MVC framework is splitting in three pieces any software or application development you're going to do. And the three pieces are the data, block, the logic, and the presentation. Okay, so it's as practical deployment, development, deployment, maintenance aspects for any software company, and it's very important to any software company today. And what is important is that basically an API, if doing the analogy with MVC, enables cloud MVCs. Okay, why that? Because they dematerialize the distribution channels, as we've seen, and your core business might be the logic, so an algorithm, a technology processing, a processing technology, sorry, a data or a presentation layer or technology, okay? The example, Twitter TweetDeck, a bit old but still valid, even though TweetDeck is not what it is now or what it used to be. But the Twitter core business is the data. They didn't have any presentation layer, and they were doing what they were doing best, and what they're doing best is the data, gathering data from users, tweets, analytics, etc. So what they said is, let's focus on our core business, and let's open up an API so that we can have third parties that are going to enhance our end users' experience and distribute the Twitter experience to as many people as possible. The API will give access to the data so that you can have third parties like TweetDeck that are going to build the presentation layer. So in that sense, APIs enable the cloud MVC model. So you have to think, what is your core business? Is it the data? Is it the logic? Is it the presentation layer? It could be one, two, or the three of those, but you still have to think which one you want to focus on and which one you want to distribute or give access to through an API. Here we've got some examples, in case it wasn't clear. Music Match, they provide more than 5 million legal lyrics for songs legally. So they're in the data business, and they have an API to access their data. And then you have developers creating crazy, cool applications for Android, iOS, and whatever to leverage those lyrics. Twilio, everybody knows Twilio. Their business is the logic. It's audio processing, SMS processing, and they sell that through an API, and that's it. They don't bother with the presentation. They don't bother with the data, even though they might be bothering with the data themselves without telling us or without at least opening up an API for that purpose. But the core business they're on is the logic. And Netflix is a presentation. So really think about what is your core business asset for your company and which one makes more sense to open through an API. Then you might want to think about the openness cycle. Am I going to open it up right away to everybody? A limited set of partners, internal partners or entities within my companies? You've got to think about that, okay? The typical cycle is, I've got my raw services, and I'm going to do an internal reuse of those raw services for an API so that I can gain flexibility, become more agile in my company, eventually save some money on some development aspects. Then I'm going to reuse that into some customer-facing application or services. That's the second step. And then, well, let's go a little bit beyond. I'm not going to be able to build a mobile app or an application for all the OSS the OSs or the platforms available out there. Just impossible. So I'm going to leverage partners for distributing my technology through an application that they will develop themselves. And then the fourth step is basically opening up to anybody, companies, partners, internal use, individual developers, to maximize the impact of your API, the reach of your business, and therefore generate additional revenues to the ones you're making right now. In terms of business models, there are tons of those. I don't think it's the latest one. It comes from Programmable Web. John Musser did that diagram. Probably the last one has a few more boxes. So as you can see, there are dozens of business models that you can apply to your API. Free, paying the developer, direct, indirect, on a per call basis, on a monthly fee basis, and there are literally dozens of pricing model. More than business model, I would call that pricing model or billing models, monetization models for your API. Then you have to think about the delivery of your API. You got an API, you want to make it available to third parties, to your internal team, to developers, whoever's going to access your API. You want to deliver it, but you want to deliver it the right way. So you're going to wonder how you're going to do monitoring, security, authentication, how are you going to manage the relationship with those users, how you're going to make sure that they use the API, your API, as per the rules that you will have set up and clearly and transparently, as Keane said, define in your terms and conditions. That's very important. Don't miss that point. So you're going to need an API management solution. Roughly 5 key building blocks in any API management solution. Authentication, access control, security, that's the first one. Second one is analytics and reporting. You need to measure what's happening on your API so that you know and understand where people are getting most value from your API and where you could gain most value from your API. You're going to need an API business engine. You can call it differently, an API manager and whatever. Something where you can set up and configure your service contracts to access your API. Your API is made of multiple functionalities, often called methods or endpoints for the tech ones, for techie people here in the audience. And you might want to package all those functionalities into different bundles, into different products. That makes sense to a specific audience, okay? And you might want to restrict the access to some of those packages or to some functions of those APIs in a way that makes sense to you and to your customers. So that's the API business engine part. Then billing and payments. You want to monetize maybe your API directly or indirectly. This will depend on your business model. But if you want to do it directly, you want to be able to track costs per call or cost per whatever and generate invoices. And a developer, I would call that a DRM, Developer Relationship Management Solution. It's kind of far reach, but it's basically a placeholder for you to meet your developers, for you to meet your community of partners, of people who are going to be using your API, building applications and services on top of it. Don't neglect them. It's very important. And finally, you're going to need some API promotion or marketing or communication. An API, people talk about it as a distribution channel. Some people talk about it as a product. You need a product manager for an API. No matter what it is for you, whether it's a product or whether it's just a distribution channel, it's just because you have it, people won't just come and use it. You're going to have to promote it, talk about it, evangelize people about your API, companies about your API, explain them what is the value that it will gain from your API to make sure that you build an audience and your API is a real benefit to your company, okay? So once you've done all that, you've gone through all those 5 or 6 steps to prepare your API program, your API strategy, let's come back to what API for my business model. We believe at 3scale that there are 4 types of API. The first one is the API is a product. This is what you sell directly and exclusively. Twilio is an example. They sell access to their API. Second one is the API projects, the product, Salesforce.com. They have an API so that third parties can build an application, put it on AppExchange, and that promotes indirectly the Salesforce.com platform. The third one is the API promotes the product. Amazon.com is an example. You might think, well, promote projects, it's kind of similar. Not really. The product, it won't necessarily bring you directly new users, new customers. Whereas in the promotes the product, Amazon.com, their listing, for example, are available via API so that any third-party website can list products on sale, for purchasing on their own e-commerce platform, and therefore that brings in direct revenues, more revenues to Amazon, more users that will, in the long term, keep on buying on the Amazon platform. And finally, the fourth model we think is out there is that the API powers and fits product, and Twitter is like that. More details about it. So I'll mention it quickly. API is a product. It's usually a direct revenue model. It's a utility or pay-per transaction type of model. You can create tiered pricing bands. I mean, you've got crazy things you can do around monetization. Projects a product is basically reach out to more places. So it's really a distribution channel in that case. You provide more utility by inviting third parties, developers, companies to create new functionalities for existing product, and eventually enable mobile. So promote the product. It's biz dev. It's lead generation, basically. How am I gonna create a hook and have those little fishes all over there, out there in the internet, bite this hook and become customers of mine? It's brand promotion. It works also through affiliate programs. And the fourth one, powers and fit the product. It's content acquisition, partner tie-in, and internal innovation, which is clearly seen through Twitter. In terms of revenues, usually you have 2 types of revenues, direct or indirect. The slides will be available on SlideShare for the ones who don't have time to take pictures. Direct revenues, your API has to be the product or has to project the product. There's no other way. So you've got some examples here. And the 2 others promotes the product and fits the product. It's an indirect source of revenue because you're not going to be able to charge for a direct call on your API. This is not what brings value to your business. A call on the Twitter API generates a tweet, but that doesn't mean that is not monetizable. At least it wasn't up until a few months ago. Now apparently it is. But what it brings is that potentially a new user. It means that there's a new user behind Twitter, behind that call on the API, behind that tweet. So some real life examples. We already mentioned a few of those. API is a product. Twilio is a clear one, but you've got like Skype, Music Match, Stripe are clear examples of that. And they make money only if their core service sees a usage growth. In the case of the API projects, the product, so we talked about Salesforce.com, 1,700 plus apps on AppExchange, 50K developers, and probably more because this slide is a few months old. Basically, the value they make out from this API that promotes a product is through increasing the customer spend and the number of customers for their core product. When it promotes the product, we've talked about Amazon.com through widgets, gadgets, whatever, that are all over the place on multiple websites. They are making money indirectly by increasing the number of customers primarily, and secondarily through the spend that those new customers will make directly through their platform. You've got other examples like Expedia, Netflix, Vimeo. And then powers and fits the product. We've talked about Twitter. And basically, it's the model they've come up to now is that the user-generated content brings value to the central product. And guess what? Now Twitter makes money from advertising tweets or bringing you new followers. So they're leveraging the user-generated content to make money themselves directly, and that's an indirect revenue source through their API. Discuss is like that, Foursquare is like that, YouTube is like that. So a few conclusions. There's no right or wrong. There's no one way, except the one of the API, I think, and still it doesn't necessarily make sense to all companies or to all businesses, even though it's become really, really critical. But for sure, there is not one single business model. There isn't one single way of monetizing your API or to create value out of your API. There are multiple ways. Actually, if you look at this, well, you don't see it very well, sorry about that. This pie chart, basically this is a repartition, the distribution of the different models that I've just mentioned earlier among, I think the sample was 1,500 companies having an API. So it's quite evenly distributed, as you can see. The core question is, what API for my business model? What are my, and underlying questions, what are my core assets? Which ones I'm going to make most value from? Obviously, who will use my API? I mean, everybody talks about developers. But developers is a very non-uniform group of persons. And it doesn't mean, it isn't because, let's say, Shopify has, whatever, 50,000 developers developing applications on their API. It doesn't mean that those 50,000 developers will be interested in using the Music Match API, or vice versa. So you still need to do some marketing to developers, even though developers don't really like marketing. You still need to think about how who are the core groups or the groups that make most sense to your business, and how to reach them and address them properly. And this is still marketing, and you've got to do it. That's unavoidable. One more minute and I'm done. The last thing is the organization core business is what is valuable, and the API is just a channel into that. So just a few reminders of what I've said before that. And that also can be summarized in this table. What, who, and how with a series of questions. The slides are going to be available on APIdays Mediterranea.apidays.io, and I guess also on other mediums. Thank you very much.
We have time for one question, so this will be yours.
Do you have now at 3scale clients that are explicitly closed for now APIs? In your, you had 3 types or 4 types of APIs, and one of those was the closed for now. Do you have people that are explicitly closed for now APIs at 3scale currently?
Yeah, we definitely have, actually, across the 4 types you've seen on this iceberg image, we've got customers that have fully public APIs. We've got customers that have an API that they use internally and all the ranges in between. The close for now is usually a company that is still in a reflection process, trying to figure out what they're going to do with their API, and instead of opening up everything from day one and doing a massive monster project, they start pieces by pieces through experimentation, and based on the results, they will decide where to go and how to do the opening of their API. But we definitely have customers that have a closed or closed for now APIs. Yeah. Mehdi is going to take care of the switch of computer. Any other question? We have apparently 1 more minute. Cool. So that means that was clear. You all know what you're going to do with your API program and strategy now. That's great. I like that. O en español, sí, también. Okay, configuration. How many of you are, go ahead. The opening of an API is clearly a business decision. Ultimately, the technical teams usually have the power of deciding or pushing towards an in-house solution or a third-party solution like 3scale. To be honest with you, we've got several customers that started building in-house their solution. And just because it's not their core business and the cost of maintaining, upgrading, updating, making their platform evolve was just so high for them versus using 3scale that after a year or two they just switched to the 3scale solution. So well, you still have companies that goes in-house. It's a cultural problem. Well, cultural problem. It's a cultural decision, I would say. Some companies prefer build everything in-house. Very often it comes from the tech team that wants to demonstrate that they can do those things, and they want to keep a hand on that and build it themselves, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense from a business point of view. So that still happens, but less and less every day, I would say. You've got enough offerings in the markets from free like 3scale to very expensive like other solutions with different features, functionalities, needs.